This is the training program of PAD Network for support of the Roma entrepreneurship. Lesson 8. Risk Management. In this lesson, we are going to identify what risk management is, its importance, the different types of risks that a company faces, and some processes to have in mind to overcome those risks. Risk management, or enterprise risk management, ERM, is the process of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling the activities of an organization in order to minimize the effects of risk on an organization's capital and earnings. Enterprise risk management expands the process to include not just risk associated with accidental losses, but also financial, strategic, operational, and other risks. In recent years, particularly after the crisis of 2008, there has been a heightened interest by organizations in ERM. Nowadays, it is really common to see that in an increasing number of industries, board of directors are required to review and report on the adequacy of risk management processes in their organizations. If you think about it, risk management occurs everywhere. We can start with everyday situations such as banks performing a credit check on an individual before issuing a personal line of credit, to more complex situations, for example, an investor buys more risk corporate bonds, or when a company wants to get in a new market. In this line, a successful risk management initiative should be proportionate to the level of risk in the organization aligned with other corporate activities, comprehensive in its scope, embedded into routine activities, and it should be dynamic by being responsive to changing circumstances. Running a business can be a dangerous occupation with many different types of risk. Some of these potential hazards can destroy a business, while others can cause serious damage that can be costly and time-consuming to repair. However, if you have a well-prepared business that have already detected the possible risk, you can be able to moderate the risk impact. There are different types of risk and in different sectors, so we will discuss some of them in the following slides. Strategic risks result directly from operating within a specific industry at a specific time. For example, shifts in consumer preferences or emerging technologies that make your product line obsolete, or other drastic market forces that can put your company in danger. They include risks arising from merger and acquisition activities, changes among customers or in demand, industry changes, research and development. To counteract strategic risk, you'll need to put measures in place constantly. For example, you might consider the strategic risk of the possibility of a US company buying one of your Canadian competitors. This might give the US company a distribution arm in Canada. So, you want to consider whether there are any US companies which have the cash share price to do this, whether there are any Canadian competitors who could be a takeover target. Operational risks are associated with your business operational and administrative procedures. These include recruitment, supply chain, accounting controls, IT systems, regulation, board composition. You should examine these operations in turn, prioritize the risk, and make provisions for such a risk happening. For example, if you are heavily reliant on one supplier for a key component, you should consider what could happen if that supplier went out of business. Financial risks are associated with the financial structure of your business, the transactions your business makes, and the financial system you already have in place. Identifying financial risks involves examining your daily financial operations, especially cash flow. If your business is too dependent on a single customer and they are unable to pay you, this could have serious implications for your business viability. You might examine the way you extend credit to new customers, who owes you money, the steps you can take to recover it, and insurance that can cover large or doubtful debts. Financial risk should take into account external factors, such as interest rates and foreign exchange rates. Rate changes will affect your debt repayment and the competitiveness of your goods and services compared with those produced abroad. Risks associated with compliance are those subjected to legislative or bureaucratic rule and regulations, or those associated with best practices for investment purposes. These can include employee protection regulations like those imposed by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or environmental concerns like those covered by the Environmental Protection Agency, or even state and local ones. Loss of a company reputation or community standing might result from product failures, lawsuit, or negative publicity. This represents reputational risk. Reputation takes time to build, but can be lost in a day. In this area of social networking, a negative Twitter posting by a customer, for example, can reduce earnings overnight. There are other risks that are more difficult to categorize. For example, physical risk. Building risks are the most common of this type, and fire or explosions are the most common risk to a building. Location risk. Among the hazards facing the location of a business are nearby fires, storm damage, flood, hurricanes or tornadoes, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. Human risk. Alcoholism and drug abuse are major risks to employees in the workforce. Other can be sickness among the workforce, which is inevitable and is always a problem. Another category could be technology risk. Power outage is perhaps the most common of technology risk. Auxiliary gas-driven power generators are a good backup system to provide electrical energy for lighting and other functions until utility power is restored. After the risks have been identified, they must be prioritized in accordance with your assessment of their probability. And you need to establish a probability scale for purpose of risk assessment. For example, risk might be very likely to occur, some chance of occurrence, small chance of occurrence, and very little chance of occurrence. They should be prioritized and managed in accordance to their probability of occurring. Enterprise risk management in business includes the methods and process used by organizations to manage risk and seize opportunities related to the achievement of their objectives. Risk management process describe the steps you need to take to identify, monitor, and control risk. Within the risk process, a risk is defined as any future event that might prevent you to meet your team goals. A risk process allows you to identify each risk, quantify the impact, and take an action now to prevent it from occurring and reducing the impact in case it might happen. The risk management process has 4 steps: identify, analyze, evaluate, and treat the risk. In the following slides, we are going to discuss about each step. The first step in preparing a risk management plan is to identify potential risks to your business. Understanding the scope of possible risk will help you develop realistic, cost-effective strategies for dealing with them. It is important that you think broadly when considering type of risks for your business, rather than just looking at obvious concerns. For example, a fire, a thief, or a market competition. Before you begin identifying risk, you need to assess your business. Think about your critical business activities, including your key services, resources, and staff, and things that could affect them. Ask what-if questions. Review your business plan and ask as many what-if questions as you can. Do brainstorming with different people, such as your account, financial advisors, staff, suppliers, and other interested parties. This will help you to get many different perspectives on the risk. As well, think about other events that have or could have affected your business. What were the outcomes of those events? Could they happen again? Think about what possible future event could affect your business. Use flowcharts, checklists, and inspections to assess your work process. Identify each step in your process and think about the associated risk. Finally, consider the worst case scenario. Thinking about the worst thing that could happen to your business can help you deal with bigger or smaller risk. The worst case scenario could be the result of several risks happening at once. Once you have identified the risk, you need to assess the possible impact of those risks. You need to separate minor risks that may be acceptable from major risks that must be managed immediately. To analyze risk, you need to work out the likelihood of it happening and the consequence it will have. This is referred to as the level of risk and can be calculated using this formula: level of risk equal consequence per likelihood. Level of risk is often described as low, medium, high, or very high. It should be analyzed in relation to what you are currently doing to control it. Keep in mind that control measures decrease the level of risk, but do not always eliminate it. Now, this is an example of risk analysis. Ratings vary from different types of business. The scale above uses 4 different levels. However, you can use as many levels as you need. Also, use descriptors that suit your purpose. For example, you might measure consequence in terms of human health rather than dollar value. Once you have established the level of risk, you then need to create a rating table for evaluating the risk. Evaluating a risk means making a decision about its severity and ways to manage it. For example, you may decide the likelihood of a fire is unlikely and you give it a score of 2. But the consequences are severe, so you give it a score of 4. Using the table and formula above, a fire therefore has a risk rating of 8. Your risk evaluation should consider the importance of the activity to your business, the amount of control you have over the risk, potential losses your business, and benefits or opportunities represented by the risk. Once you have identified, analyzed, and evaluated your risk, you need to rank them in order of priority. You can then decide which method you will use to treat unacceptable risk. Treating risk involves working through options to deal with unacceptable risk to your business. Unacceptable risks range in severity. Some risks will require immediate treatment, while others can be monitored and treated later. Your risk analysis and evaluation will help you prioritize the risks that need to be treated. When you are developing a plan for treating the risk, consider the following things: the method of treatment, the people responsible for treatment, the cost involved, the benefit of treatment, the likelihood of success, and the way to measure the success of the treatment. There are some options for treating the risk. Avoid the risk. If it's possible, you might decide not to proceed with an activity that is likely to generate risk. Reduce the risk. You can reduce a risk by reducing the likelihood of the risk happening, for example, through quality control processes, or by reducing the impact if the risk occurs, for example, through an emergency procedure. Transfer the risk. You may be able to shift some or all of the responsibility for the risk to another party through insurance, outsourcing, etc. You may also be able to transfer risk by cross-training to staff so that more than one person knows how to do in a certain period. Make sure you have adequate insurance. Speak to your insurer to find out if you have the right insurance cover for your business. And finally, you can accept the risk. You may accept a risk if it can be avoided, reduced, or transferred. Other risks may be extremely unlikely and therefore too impractical or expensive to treat. Good risk management not only requires appropriate identification, assessment, and reporting of risk to the board to determine an organization's risk profile, but also it is essential to understand how much risk is acceptable and how much the organization can bear. Risk appetite helps you to define the level and nature of risk that an organization is willing to take in order to ensure that its business plan is delivered in accordance with the stakeholders' expectations and within the constraints set by the debt holders and regulators. The risk appetite statement should define a specific tolerance related to the company's performance. The statement should provide the following aspects: Provide a clear understanding of the amount and type of risk that the organization is comfortable in taking, including reputational risk, for example. Be reflective of all key aspects of the business. Specify maximum tolerable limits and variability using both quantitative and qualitative parameters. This will be driven by corporate objectives and stakeholders' expectations and constraints. Reflect the desired balance between risk versus reward. Finally, provide a framework that will ensure that an action-based approach is undertaken in order to create a real effect on the organization's business strategy and approach. Key performance indicators, KPIs, is a way of expressing risk appetite. The use of KPIs in a risk appetite statement provides a basis to test the sensitivity against different levels of unplanned losses. For example, many companies are uncomfortable if their KPIs deviate by more than 3 to 5%, and it is therefore important to identify the size of potential losses that will test this limit. Specifying risk appetite involves more than defining a monetary amount, because there will always be extreme scenarios where this figure is breached. It is necessary to add a probability dimension, so a typical bar risk appetite statement might be useful. The evaluation of risk and the appetite statement should be directly linked to everyday activities of the board. Without a competent board, manageable difficulties are more likely to escalate out of control, and therefore it will be a greater chance that the organization will experience major losses, damage to its reputation, or disappear altogether. A common problem for non-executive or supervisory board members is to face major challenges in securing adequate flows of objective information about the performance of the business. In fact, boards can fail to manage risk successfully for a variety of reasons, so boards should ensure that any discussion around a strategy considers the full range of key risks that the organization is exposed to, and not focusing only in financial risk. Boards should ensure that any discussion around a strategy considers the full range of key risks that the organization is exposed to. These will typically fall into one of four groups. Financial risk. These are typically well controlled and are often the focus of many board risk discussions, driven by the increased regulatory, accounting, and financial audit focus. Operational risk. As these will relate to the specific operations of the organization, they will typically be managed from within the business and will often have a focus on health and safety type issues, as industry regulations and standard requires. Hazard risk, often driven by major exogenous factors that impact the environment in which the organization operates. And strategic risk. These include risk factors that are typically external or impact the most senior management decisions, and are often missed from many risk registers. In order to achieve a good risk management, board members need to understand who they are, how they decide what is right, what they do, and their role as leaders in meeting this challenge. In this sense, the challenge to have an effective board of directors is that the board members need to understand their personal and collective character, judgment, and behavior. And for this, it is required insight, oversight, and expertise not found in rule books, tick books, and code of conducts, but in moral philosophy and social psychology. In order to overcome this challenge, it is important that boards improve their focus on risk and risk management by integrating risk into the board strategy debate. By doing this, board members will often dedicate a reasonable amount of their time to understand, review, and challenge an organization's strategy. As a way of conclusion, we can say that good risk management requires an appropriate identification, assessment, and reporting of risk to the board to determine an organization's risk profile. It is essential to have an understanding of how much risk is acceptable, how much the organization can bear. All organizations need to take on some risk in order to achieve strategic objectives and deliver returns. The key risks that an organization is exposed to will be those that affect its ability to achieve its strategy or performance objective. Thus, it is important that discussion on how much risk is acceptable to an organization need to be made in the context of its strategy objective. When the board is evaluating the risk in terms of the strategy, some of the key questions that they should have in mind are: how well is my strategy actually defined? A good understanding of the good risk to strategy processes and the value of the organization require a good understanding of the strategy itself. How broad are the risks we are considering? A strategy needs to be defined in the context of the risk environment in which the business operates. The broader the consideration of the type of risk the business faces, the better the strategy can be developed to respond to or navigate this risk. What risk scenarios have we considered to test our plan? Stress testing business plan assumptions to determine when the business might break will help boards to determine how much risk is acceptable. Have we mapped our risk to key performance and value measures? Where possible, consideration of risk in the context of how stakeholders measure value in the business is vital. This will help management to articulate to stakeholders how the risk they are taking or the business is exposed to may impact to the desired outcome. As well as some of the key actions for board members are to integrate the discussion around risk and strategy, to align your organization strategy objectives with your desire to take or mitigate risk, but measured in a consistent way, to build in mechanisms within your risk and strategy discussion to ensure an appropriate variety of risks are considered across the financial, operational, hazard, and strategy risk spectrum. To aspire to a more risk-aware culture by ensuring risk is considered alongside performance in your organization's key activities and incentive mechanisms. It is time to implement the concepts and process that we have seen in this lesson, so we are going to simulate a process of risk management. Please follow the instructions. Divide into teams with 5 persons in each team. Each team has its own enterprise. Each person has a role member of board of director. Each team has to identify any possible risk about its company. Please use the map template and fill it in with the possible risk. After identifying and name the possible risk of each company, then each team has to analyze this risk. Each team is evaluated by the trainer and the one with the higher rank is the winner. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next lesson.